Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Wyrzykowska, and I am a lawyer based in Warsaw, Poland, but I'm here in my capacity of AIJA president. And before we start with our wonderful webinar within a series of Toolkit for a Change, and I will pass the voice to our dear Francesca Salerno, Diversity Officer in AIJA. I will tell you a little more about AIJA itself. So AIJA is the only global association of young lawyers, which means the lawyer under the age of 45. We were actually created 60 years ago. This year, we celebrate our 60th anniversary, and we are a global network of lawyers to cooperate professionally, develop professionally, but also share knowledge and know-how. We are based in Brussels, in Belgium. You can see our webpage here if you want to find out more details. Right now, we are present in 90 countries, and we have 4,000 individual members, but also 50 collective, approximately 50, but the number is rising, collective bar association members. More than 700 law firms is actually being represented in AIJA. And although we are an association of young lawyers, by definition, actually 65% of our members is in leadership positions in their law firms. It's important to mention that our members can gather themselves and associate themselves within 21 scientific commissions, and that is that should be their primary goal, to reach out to them depending on their area of practice. I didn't mention about the diversity and inclusion chart and all the numbers that we have actually reached in AIJA that we are super proud of. 40% of AIJA members are women. But I will not develop that. You see that we have a wonderful diversity officer to make sure that we really are in line with all the guidelines regarding that. This is the list of all the commissions that we have in AIJA, so 21, with a specific focus on one commission, skills commission, which is relevant to all our members. Other than that, we have also initiatives relevant to all members, which are listed here more or less. So we have AIJA Women Network, we have a series of AIJA podcasts. We also have our sustainability officer, who is also actually together with Francesca working on a series on Toolkit for a Change. So diversity matters and sustainability matters in law firms. We also have Human Rights Committee. We all know that ESG is becoming incredibly important, and also human rights aspect is incredibly important also for business lawyers. And finally, we have appointed last year our legal tech board, who keeps our members up to date on legal tech solutions and latest development in that respect. What we do is we organize events in person and events online. So other than this fantastic webinar series, Toolkit for a Change, again, focused on diversity and sustainability in law firms, we have our online AIJA Academy each semester. This semester, it's focused on legal writing, legal design, public speaking, but also legal tech. But we also have a series of in-person events during which you can meet our members, learn from our scientific program, and also grow your network during our social program. Can we get back to the slide? Thank you. So this year, our flagship event is our half-year May conference in Gothenburg. So next month. Please check the fantastic program on electoral mobility, and of course our annual 60 International Young Lawyers Congress in Singapore, taking part last days of August this year. It will be focused on the future of the legal profession. Its title is also Unite and Embrace the Change. We will be discussing the latest developments in the legal industry. So it's really relevant to all lawyers in the industry. You will also see, next slide, please. You will also see here on this chart that our lineup of events is much bigger. We have plenty of seminars which are being organized by our commissions. You have the list for now here on this chart, but you can also check what's going on in AIJA on our webpage. This year, we of course focus on helping Ukraine and specifically Ukrainian lawyers. For your information, we have offered Ukrainian lawyers to join AIJA for free this year, so they don't pay for their membership, and also all the registrations from the AIJA Academy, our online learning platform, will go to Ukraine, to humanitarian organization, which will be selected by our Ukraine task force, which we have appointed also in this respect, mainly to facilitate exchange of information with respect to potential employment options and opportunities for Ukrainian lawyers fleeing from their country, and obviously looking for a job potentially in the jurisdictions in which we are also represented. So that's what we do in AIJA to support our dear colleagues from Ukraine. Other than that, I just want to mention that although yes, indeed, I am a president of AIJA this year, I'm being supported by the Bureau, which are also François Barret, our immediate past president, and Maurice Maurer, our first vice president. François Barret is French, Maurice Maurer is Swiss, and our dear, of course, Victoria Carey, our association manager, who is also your point of contact. But if you have any questions, you want to reach out, you want to check what we are doing, please feel free to check our webpage or drop us an email. We will be happy to get connected. Thank you so much. And now I will pass the voice to our dear diversity officer, Francesca Salerno. Francesca, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anna. Well, as Anna said, our association has a wide commitment to its members to help them through sustainability and diversity topics to be improved in their law firms. So what are we discussing today is why and how to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion in your law firms. We know that this is a very discussed topic nowadays. However, despite the many words spent, sometimes they are often of little use in practice. So what we want to do today with our speakers is to instead discuss which are the real and tangible reasons for improving diversity, equity, and inclusion in your law firms. And in particular, we want to understand which are the real benefits that you may gain in acting this way, and which are the areas where this benefit can be most found. So just stealing a statement that I found on one of our speakers' webpage, an activist said that diversity is being invited to the party while inclusion is being asked to dance. Now, we will see in a minute with our speaker how we dance in law firms with diversity. But let me first introduce the 4 speakers we have today that I have the privilege to moderate. First of all, we have Kathleen Van Nuffel. She is director at Steptoe Brussels with a long history in the law practice industry. Kat is founder and co-chair of the Alliance for Legal Diversity and Inclusion. She is an active member of Steptoe D&I Committee and Pride Affinity Group and of the Brussels CSR team. Kat is also a member of several forums and communities supporting diversity and inclusion initiative in the workplace. Then we have Cecilia Carrara. She's partner at Legans Avvocati Associati in Rome. She has a significant experience both in the field of international arbitration and in the sector of merger and acquisition and extraordinary corporate transactions. She's also responsible for the German desk of the firm and coordinator of the CSR activities of the firm. She's also a member of the steering committee of the Arbitration Pledge, which is the first association created to promote equal representation in arbitration. Then we have Daniel Woden. He is partner at the Brussels office of Herbert Smith Freehills. Daniel is an expert in European and UK competition law matters, having acted on complex and challenging merger control cases and cartel investigation, with a particular focus on pharmaceutical, financial services, mining, TMT, and retail sectors. Daniel is a member of the D&I committee at Herbert Smith Freehills and the diversity and inclusion champion in the Brussels office of the firm. And last but not least, we have Stefan Merix. I hope I'm spelling your surname correctly, Stefan, apologies if not. His partner at Fjell Fisher in Brussels. Stefan is a leading expert in employment, social security, and business migration matters with over 30 years of experience. He is the head of the Belgian employment law practice and is also coordinating the firm international employment law practice. Stefan is also professor of employment law at the University College of Brussels. Now, thanking again our outstanding speakers for being with us today. Without no further ado, I would like to start and with my first question to you, Kat. So we said that nowadays there is a lot of discussion and a lot of words on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the legal world and in particular in law firms. But now my question to you is this a real issue or is just a marketing strategy or tactic of law firms to make lawyers appear, let's say, less greedy and more socially committed, more attractive on the market? So in other words, why really lawyers and law firms need to improve diversity in their workplace, and we as market users, why need them to do this? Thank you, Kat.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me. And I'm looking at different screens because I have the slides still and my camera is up. So if my eyes go all over the place, it's because I'm trying to keep up where the speakers are, where the participants are. And so just to be clear. Anyway, so thank you, first of all, for inviting me. Diversity, inclusion, and equality and equity even is, for me, it's a passion. I'm so passionate about it, but also for many other reasons, which I'm happy to share. It's a very fair question to start with. I think it's important that law firms continue to make the efforts when it comes to diversity, equality, and inclusion, because, you know, and some may do it for marketing purposes, because we all know at this stage that clients are more and more pushing for it, to do it. And for me, it's okay. That may be a good reason as well to do it. For me, it's as long as, you know, we're doing it, because it is important. And some of you may have seen that there was a letter in January, I believe January 2019. There was an open letter from 270 general counsels. And the title was like, improve on diversity or lose our business. So I'm sure that played a role too, that suddenly, you know, for the past few years, diversity and inclusion gets more attention, especially in the press, but also by law firms. But like I said, if it helps to do or have law firms to do better, then it should be. Now, if we go back to, or if we really go to the actual reasons why we should be doing it, I can actually name a few, and even sharing my own personal story, which I think is part of the sort of like foundation of diversity and inclusion. When I was like, it's already 12 years ago, so at that point it was even not actually discussed as much, diversity and inclusion. You know, when I was sort of wanting to do my coming out, I didn't feel comfortable and safe. And I could blame it on the fact that indeed diversity wasn't a hot topic. If you compare it to date, maybe a bit easier because less efforts were made. But if I would have received the right signals that I could be myself without any sort of like, you know, strange feeling or whatever, then it would have been, for me, I left the firm. So diversity, inclusion, and equality is part of your talent retention. It should be part of your talent management, because you may avoid losing talent, but it's also about attracting talent, and we need to be inclusive to start with. So I mean, and diversity and inclusion goes beyond LGBT. It's all underrepresented groups deserve attention. Research has proven that the power of diversity is the creation of uniqueness. It's original thinking. You know, if you have a diversity of opinions, it's reflected in the diversity of people. So, and law firms have come a far way. So there's no secret about that. There's no point that we sort of start like, I mean, if you look back, and when I actually started 25 years ago, working for my very first law firm, the table was full with like white male, and I call it striped suit men, all sort of looking into the same direction, thinking exactly the same, and maybe that worked out, but very few women. And if firms would have not made any efforts since then till now, it probably would have been still the same, because you always pick up that, you know, as long as men decide like, okay, you could get promoted, it may remain the same. So I think on the other hand, we have to be careful how we actually sort of say that. But we know that in principle, any diverse organization is happier, more productive, and is probably also more competitive. And that goes for all the industries. If you look at like, if people are sitting around the table with diverse, they know like what they can sell. Because if you only have like exactly all the same people looking the same around the table, how can you know how the market looks? How can you know like, okay, what other people may be expecting? So on that end, I think there's a lot of work to be done. The press is picking up on it, which pushes the clients are picking up on it as well. And I don't know if you, I mean, for me, it's also like, I love seeing it even in the press, because then we're all confronted by it, that we have to change. I mean, there was recently an article as well of a top female partner who actually retired now and was saying that she regrets that she didn't do more for her female colleagues, because there's still the thing like where female lawyers or associates are asked to take minutes. I mean, there's so much that is to be done. So diversity, inclusion, equality goes beyond like looking at minority groups, underrepresented groups. So there's a lot of work to be done. So for me, this is so important. Yes, we have to. I don't know if that answers your question, Francesca, because I can, you know.
No, absolutely, it answers my question, and thank you very much for your also piece of experience. Daniel, what do you think about this?
Well, first of all, I'd also like to thank you for inviting me to speak today. I agree, violently with everything I just heard. I think DEI is of vital importance to the future of our profession. And I guess with that in mind, there's a sort of big picture point, a point of principle I'd like to make at the very outset. Francesca, I think you're quite rightly going to ask us some challenging and, dare I say, deliberately provocative questions. And the workshop and the questions I think we're going to be asked think about DEI in transactional terms. So what is in it for a law firm? What is the benefit for us? What is the bargain? And to my mind, I think just as Kat mentioned, there are really important tangible benefits available to law firms if they advocate and improve DEI, and we're going to talk more about that shortly. But at the same time, I think it's really important we don't lose sight of the overwhelming, clear-cut moral case in support of improved diversity and inclusion within our profession. And I do think it's worth emphasizing that in large part, lawyers, partners, law firms, we do sincerely promote DEI because it's morally the right thing to do. There should be no place for discrimination or intolerance in the modern workplace. And I'd hope that this is all obvious and self-evident, but we shouldn't lose sight of the wood for the trees. That, I promise, however, is the end of my sermon for today. I think you asked us originally, do law firms need to improve DEI? Is it marketing spin or, just so much empty rhetoric? And I guess I've got a couple of comments specifically in response to that question. I mean, first, I think, regrettably, we do need to improve and keep improving. If you look at partnerships within law firms, you see many middle-aged white men, and I feel like an arch hypocrite calling it out, but it's an important point to call out. It is an example, I think a really obvious example, of where DEI improvement still needs to be made. Women are characteristically underrepresented within the senior echelons of law firms, and that should not be the case. I mean, in that regard, they say that a picture can tell 1,000 words, and I don't know if someone within AIJA could please help me technically to put on screen a picture I contributed earlier. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, because it's beyond me. I'm not sure if that has materialized or not. There we are. That's great. This is a picture of the partnership in London of Herbert Smith in the very early 1980s, so something like 40 years ago. And I think the more astute members of this audience may be able to spot that something is slightly amiss with this picture. Lots of white middle-aged men and one woman. I should mention the woman standing front and center there is Dorothy Livingston, who is still a consultant with our firm. She practices competition law, or I'm a competition lawyer, so I have the real privilege of still working with Dorothy. But I think back in the early 1980s and earlier, she was a bold, courageous trailblazer. She was talking about issues of gender equality and diversity before they were fashionable. And I'm happy to say that this picture that I'm showing you adorns the walls of the offices of many partners within my firm, because it is a salutary reminder of the progress that we have made over the decades. And speaking of which, if we could skip to the very next picture, please. Back last year, once upon a time, we had one female partner in London. As of last year, the partnership elected a woman, Rebecca, to be our senior partner and leader. So I think this is evidence that progress is being made, but more progress has to be made. And I think we're all sincere in that belief. Those are the ends of I don't need to refer any further to the pictures. So if someone technically adept can make them disappear, that would be great. I only had one other concluding comment I just wanted to make very briefly. I think the issues that we're struggling with are not unique to the legal sector. We're discussing wider societal problems that affect many industries, including the legal profession. But the fact that these problems are widespread, the fact that these problems are deep-rooted, is not an excuse for inaction on our part. And maybe I'm excessively optimistic, but I would hope that we could actually set an example. The legal profession could forge ahead. We can advocate, promote successfully DEI within our law firms, and other sectors will actually emulate us and look to us as an example. So this is a long-winded way of saying, Francesca, going back to your original question, are we sincere in what we say? Is this all marketing spin? No, I think we are sincere, and there are really good reasons, good commercial reasons, which I think we'll come on to, why we're sincere, but it's also the right thing to do, and that moral imperative we shouldn't lose sight of.
Thank you, Daniel. Cecilia, coming to you and Stefan, I would like to probably add just a bit to my question, which is, but weren't law firms already enough diverse? So we need to improve diversity, or we were already on the verge of the curve?
Thank you, Francesca. I think it is quite right. We need to improve. And also it's very important to continue to speak about the topic. Maybe there have been a few years where, because there has been a lot of public debate, the impression may be that firms have already improved a great deal. Firms have improved, but the improvement may be not lasting if it is not supported with continuous effort. So I don't have any pictures, but I would like to share with you a couple of observations. So after now the restrictions have been lifted after 2 years of COVID, the first time that I went back to Milan, as usual for Italian practitioners, it's very common to commute between Rome and Milan. And disgracefully, I went by plane, which is environmentally not ideal, but it does help if you have a meeting over a day. And you wouldn't be surprised to know that the first plane in the morning is particularly packed with lawyers. And it gave me a shiver to see that I was the only woman on the plane between Rome and Milan. I don't know if it was a coincidence, but I have been observing this for a few weeks. And it does seem to me that after COVID, there are less women around than before COVID. And this is just to say that because the social effort really needs to go beyond the cosmetics of numbers, occasionally we really need to keep up with the pressure. Another example, we have the delight of being able to travel again for conferences, including Gothenburg in May. And there again, I was in Istanbul 2 weeks ago. And even though there were 2 topics on diversity on both conferences that took place one day after the other, and usually arbitration events are also attended quite well by female colleagues, not to speak about other diversities. It was a male-dominated conference again. So maybe we should be thinking about restrictions and how this affects women and different categories generally that might be more fragile when it comes to social changes that we know have a graver impact on those that are already a little bit more fragile. So again, from my side, and I close for the moment for the next round of comments, it has been in Italy very, very important to have requests from the general councils, as Kat was mentioning before. So letters of general councils promoting diversity and inclusion in firms. I think generally there is a conviction that it's morally right, but I would also say that those who do feel so must do twice as much, because there will always be those who think, well, might be good morally, but I'm really interested in what makes a difference for the business. So there has to be a double effort on those who do have a moral engagement.
Thank you, Cecilia. Indeed, yeah, I absolutely agree. Stefan, what's your view on this first question?
Yes, Francesca, thank you. Thank you very much for you and AIJA to invite me. On your question, are we there already in the D&I law firms? I think that we come a long way. Just to give you a few figures, but it's only since 1958 that women, and then we are only talking about gender equality, that women in Belgium were allowed to become part of a law firm before they needed an authorization of their husband, and that authorization could be retracted at any moment during their career. So imagine you have built up your career, your clients, and your husband decides now you're going to stop from one day to another. So it's only from 58. Today we see people graduating from university, 65% of women. If we look at judges, it's 58% are women. But where we lack women is in top functions. Top functions as well as judges, as well as in law firms, because only 20% of women, approximately, it's an average, of women in Belgian law firms are partners. So only 20%, but they represent 65% coming out of the university. So, I mean, there is still some way to go forward, absolutely. And unfortunately, the only reason a company or a law firm may think of changing things is the return on investment. I think that's the only good reason the board will take into effect. The values and the big slogans every law firm makes, they are very clear, they are accepted. But let me give you a few, and they have already been touched upon, reasons why, in fact, law firms should be more diverse and, in fact, contribute to the return on investment. Well, first of all, a very general study, McKinsey, stating that whenever you have a more diverse workforce, you are likely to have 25% more profit. Everyone acknowledges that whenever you have different people around the table, ethnicity, gender, etc., you have different views and you are more efficient and you're more creative in finding a solution to a problem. But also, I think there is a war for talent going on outside there. And just a Deloitte survey found out that for young people, the diversity and that's very important, inclusiveness policy is one of their key elements to make a decision where they're going to work in the future. So this is, whenever we want to attract the best ever people in our law firms, then we have to be addressing diversity and inclusiveness. And if that would not be enough, I think there is another cost element. Whenever you invest in someone, whenever you lose someone, going back to that Deloitte survey, whenever you lose someone and you have to rehire or recruit someone else, a US study calculated it would cost the firm about $250,000 to $400,000 US. So you see someone going somewhere else because your diversity inclusiveness policy may not be there where it should be. So they find themselves working at another place. It costs you a fortune as a law firm. Furthermore, you have to find the new one who is the best placed. And then again, you are confronted with inclusiveness and your policy. And then, of course, you have to form them. You have to coach them. And eventually, the old one, the one who left your law firm, has run away with some clients. So even that is a perspective. So I think there are quite some elements from And unfortunately, as I said, it's the return on investment today which is certainly making the difference. Well, I think that is certainly an element. A last element I would like to say, just to touch upon, is the client demand, and it was already mentioned. And we may think this is something US or this is something Anglo-Saxon. I mean, the general counsels, I remember also a letter from Coca-Cola, general counsel stating very clearly that you had to prove, if you want to be serving them, you had to prove your diversity and that you were diverse effectively. But it's not only. We just came out of a tender and a pitch, in fact, and in the engagement letter to be signed of a Belgian headquartered company who has operations all over Europe, it was mentioned that we had to fill in a paragraph or an article exactly pointing out on what our diversity and inclusiveness policy is and what our goals are in the next few years to achieve them, to be able to sign the engagement letter. So I think there are a few good reasons from an economical point of view for law firms certainly to go on more diversity and inclusiveness. Let's say, and let's put together the values and I say the morals. We all, I think, and all law firms are okay and accept these.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I'm particularly glad of having your employment law point of view, because I think it's extremely helpful to the discussion. And indeed, I personally think that talent retention is one of the main drivers for improving diversity and inclusion in law firms. Taking it from there, I have my second question that goes actually into the real benefit, the economic benefit that you and Daniel and everybody were discussing before. So, and I would like to start with you, Daniel, to follow up on what you were saying. So, imagine that you were to sell diversity and inclusion in your law firm to your managing partners. So you were to advocate why improving, why actively take steps to improve diversity and inclusion in your law firm. So which would be the advantages, the benefits that you would stress under an economic or social perspective to your firm, to understand which is the return on the investment that also Stefan was mentioning before?
Happily, I think that argument has been waged a sort of generation ago and everyone's already on board. But just to proceed with this hypothesis, I mean, I think the moral case and economic case actually all point in the same direction. And there are at least 3 key reasons why law firms have a strong economic incentive to advocate and promote DEI. And indeed, I think other panelists have already mentioned some of these, but I'll go over the same ground because it's worth discussing again. I mean, first, foremost, we are a client service industry. As I think Kat and Stefan have both alluded to, our clients demand that we improve DEI, and we have to provide proof of our achievements on a frequent basis. It's interesting that several of us have all pointed to a key, I think, watershed moment for the legal industry in January 2019, when I think it's 170 general leading counsel within leading companies signed an open letter to law firm partners, and they expressed their clear dissatisfaction, if not outrage, with the lack of diversity within law firms. The signatories to that letter, and they expressed many fine sentiments about how we have to improve diversity. But, you know, if you're looking at return on investment, or if you're looking very narrowly at the bottom line, you know, notwithstanding those fine sentiments, I think any managing partner or any partner will take note of the fact that the signatories to that letter together represented hundreds of millions of dollars in legal spend. And they made it, I think, abundantly clear that they would not be spending their money with law firms if they did not see those firms making palpable improvements in relation to DEI. So I think that was a watershed moment, but we see it day to day. I think, just as Stefan was mentioning, when I go to pitches to win new work from prospective clients, they very frequently, almost invariably, want to see proof that my team is diverse and that my firm practices what it preaches in relation to DEI. And a DEI policy statement is, I think, never sufficient. I often have to submit statistical evidence in relation to the diversity of the firm, what the firm is doing in terms of recruitment, retention. We really have to try to prove our case. So client demand, I think, is key in changing the behavior of law firms. It provides us with a very strong economic incentive to do better. Our clients are exercising a sort of corrective influence over us, I think. I mean, I guess the second point I wanted to call out, and I think this has already been alluded to as well, we have to improve our culture to recruit and then, very importantly, retain the very best lawyers. The cost of having to re-recruit people is enormous. But most importantly, and I think Stefan also alluded to the fact that there is a sort of, a fierce competition for legal talent. To differentiate ourselves from other firms to provide premium service, the very best possible service to our clients, we need to have the best and most talented lawyers. We need to reward talent. We need to retain talent. We need to ensure that talent can flourish within our firms, and that is irrespective of gender, race, sexuality. Talent is talent, and we need to nurture, find, retain talent. I think the third thing I'd call out is that there are good reasons to believe that a diverse workforce is a better and more productive workforce. I mean, put very simply, if we recruit the same people from the same backgrounds with the same views, the same attitudes, I don't think that's healthy for a law firm. It's not healthy for any organization. A homogenous workforce is not as innovative or resilient or capable or dynamic as a more diverse workforce. And there's evidence for these contentions. And it's interesting, Stefan already mentioned the report from McKinsey back in 2018. I was also going to mention it because it is, I think, that had real impact amongst the legal community, because it showed that there was a very strong positive correlation between diversity in management teams and improved financial performance. So, there is hard data, statistical evidence to corroborate the contention that a diverse workforce is a more profitable workforce. So I'd hope in making a presentation to any managing partner, if you bear in mind at least those three considerations, and there are many other more considerations we could list, but certainly those three considerations are economically very compelling.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you, Daniel. Kat, which is your experience on this?
Yeah, well, Daniel, that letter seems to have had a serious impact because everybody refers to it, the 170 general counsels for sure. I think that was for me as well in 2019 when I sort of suggested to law firms like, okay, why are we not sort of forming an alliance to focus on diversity and inclusion? Because there is a serious problem, which I've seen over all those years having been so long in a law firm. And it was great to see that quite a lot of firms immediately, about 11, jumped immediately to sort of like, oh, that's a great idea but I was simply lucky as well that it happened in 2019. So it was sort of, when clients started to sort of, pushing us more. But at the same time, as I already said, for me, it's like, if it starts with because clients are pushing us, that's fine. In the end, the result counts. And when we come back to talent management and talent retention, like I already said as well, we all agree to that, so that's an easy to sell. You would think the question we can actually prove it as well, because most law firms are losing talent between 30 and 35 years. I mean, when people start thinking about children, there's a whole model sort of problem that we have about, parental leave, maternity leave, paternity leave. Some law firms are still behind on sort of like looking into that. So there are a couple of things that actually could easily be solved, but there is also the will to do so. And again, recently, because I keep on referring to press articles, sorry about that, but I always get sort of like, intrigued by it, because there were 4 large law firms, and it happened in the Netherlands, because we're talking about US and UK, but that was in the Netherlands, 4 large law firms that actually, in which in that article they got interviewed, associates got interviewed, and they disclosed actually how badly they were treated as young female associates. So again, why do we have to do this? It's quite easy. You can pull up all those things. But at the same time, for me, what I've seen is having in the meantime, Lydia counts 50 members. And what I've seen as well, like, we all know why, we all know what we would like to do differently, but the question is how. And walking that talk is the high line that we should sort of keep in mind. But what I've seen as well, like with our members and collegial firms as well, that not necessarily are a member, not everybody has the resources to dedicate time to it, because it does require time and efforts. Not everybody has sort of budget, because it does request as well. You know, when you want to do diversity inclusion, you want to go out there and see like, okay, how can we recruit differently? There's so many things that comes with it, or don't know even how to start. Okay, what does it take to build a diversity policy, for instance, which we all think, oh, it's pretty easy. It's out there even on Google. You can just copy it over, but then you need to have the action plan as, okay, where do we start? Which part do we, and what is the most important? So one of the things I always plead when people ask me to talk about diversity policies, I said, first of all, your leadership needs to commit. There's no point on coming up with all sorts of policies if your leadership is just going to hang it or put it or advertise it somewhere, but not actually do anything. So there's a whole thing, steps that comes with it. So if you have your policy, okay, what do you put in action? Like Stefan already said as well, there's this discrimination law that we can actually hide in Belgium behind, but it's more, it goes beyond discriminations. There's so many things. What about our model? We have to revisit our model. We have to revisit our recruit. How do we recruit? It's about ask, measure, act, reflect, and fine tune. What about doing a survey, which helps as well? Do we actually know leadership, what actually is living in our own office? Do we know where there's some specific problems? Because some people think diversity, it's about minority groups, but inclusion can be just a separate part of it as well, because we all want to be included in whatever is happening. Training, unconscious bias training, one of the biggest things that are really causing a lot of those issues is because people don't realize, and I hope it's unconscious, we all have a bias. But when you actually go to a training, you're surprised how, I mean, I even myself, because I do give unconscious bias training now and then, and even myself then sometimes am caught in like, okay, yeah, indeed, I've thought about it that way as well. You know, sometimes when you're walking in a dark alley and you see somebody wearing a hoodie, the first thing that you do is you may sort of be like, okay, where's my wallet? Or you get scared. But it's also like, you know, around the table, people think like, okay, if we don't get a lawyer in, because we talk about the war of talent and we need the best talent lawyers, but maybe we should stop thinking about that as well, because we want the best talented lawyers, but what does that show? How does it show whether this is going to be the best talented lawyer that we've just hired? If we keep on looking at degrees, specifically Harvard, LLM, Bruges, and all those things, with all respect, but what about people that cannot necessarily afford to go through all those? There may be talented people that are still working next to their job or studying. I mean, it's studying, I mean, and so, I mean, there's so much that is to be done about that. So I think one of the important things that I always recommend is investigate your current practices. If we talk about talent management and retention, there's a lot that comes with it. And I think diversity, inclusion, equality, and equity. And I always feel like equity should be part as well, because we all want to do equal and be having equality as a main thing, but not everybody thinks about that the equity comes with it. And I always use the example of, you know, if you want to, if you don't give the equal opportunities to a person, you also have this equity that comes with it, because not everybody, even if you give equal opportunities, may not be exactly what you actually need to do. So I think it needs to be part of your business strategy. It may take us out of our comfort zone, but that's exactly how progress is made. Not only do law firms, you know, you need to embrace diversity, gain higher market share. It's simply the right thing to do, as we already said. So, and I think maybe to think, I'm just thinking about what I missed on my sort of like, so the hiring practices, in my view, would be something to revisit and analyze for sure. You know, what you could do as well is like those affinity groups, but just don't set up affinity groups. Make sure that there's actually something happening.
Thank you.
Allyships. So Francesca, I rest my case.
Indeed. So Stefan, coming back to your return on investment.
Yes, return on investment. Well, building on that, I mean, we all know that whenever you are fine working, you feel comfortable working. Your workspace is nice. People are respected or for what they are, how they are, and no matter who they are. In fact, that will create a positive atmosphere, a positive culture, and that positive culture will then create, of course, a return on investment or a benefit. Albeit that you create really around your law firm that sense of belonging, the sense of, okay, whoever I am, doesn't matter, I'm respected and I have the equal chances. It's what I would call inclusiveness. And I think that is, we always say diversity and inclusiveness. I think sometimes we should put inclusiveness before the diversity, because it really means that we have to make people feel happy at the workplace. How do you do that? I mean, there are, of course, a number of elements to do this, and it has already been mentioned. I would summarize it in fix the system, don't fix the people. It's kind of saying that your policies should be addressing the different categories of staff, the backgrounds, etc. So your policies, but it should also be monitored. It should be followed up. It should be broadened. And I agree that it takes quite some time, but if you gather people who are really convinced, and if you create a certain mindset in that firm, you will find people who are going to take it on and are going to make it happen, I would say. We had recently a case where a couple wanted to have a child, but it's on a specific way, I would say. We created a policy just to be as broad as possible for however the child came into the household, there would be a minimum number of days of paid leave. Man, women, whatever. In fact, just receiving a child, fostering, adopting. For independent people in Belgium, they don't have any leave at all. But just to be able to address every single specific scenario which may occur. So fix the system, so put in place the policies and monitor them, or have someone or a committee monitored how to exclude. That way, you're going to create a certain number of role models, and that is also very important. Why would a woman give everything she has at a workplace if she sees that amongst 30 partners, there is only one woman? She will say, well, this is not the place that I want to work because I will never get to that partnership. We have an openly gay global managing partner, and I'm sure that people joining our firm, LGBTQIA, feel themselves comforted by the fact that the general or the global managing partner is openly gay. So they find themselves comfortable, and they have that role model to say, well, if he can make it, I can make it. So it doesn't matter what my background, the same goes for race, same goes for gender, etc. Because that's very important, I think, to create. By fixing the systems, you're going to create role models. People are going to identify themselves, and you're giving, as a law firm, then the chances to those persons to access and to motivate them to go there, because it's possible, and they know, or they will feel that it is possible.
Indeed, thank you very much, Stefan. Going to you, Cecilia, then which are these benefits not only valuable, but also measurable?
Yes, thank you, Francesca. I think they ought to be measurable. And in order for them to be measurable, there has to be a strategy so that you can trace your efforts and you can trace whether or not you're really doing something to pursue your own objectives. And here I would like to make an example of something, of a process that we've been going through as a firm, not only concerning diversity and inclusion, but related to corporate social responsibility in general. So two points. We have decided now already 3 years ago to consider ourselves as a firm and to adhere to the UN Global Compact project and to make ourselves a communication on progress annually, which goes under the acronym of COP. Now, in the first year, the format was free, or it was something new for corporates as well. And again, I had to sell this idea to the managing partner as well as to other partners of the firm. But it was still a quite loose process. So there was a certain degree of confidence to accept without having the pressure of taking on something that would engage too much the firm. We have, for the first time, collected numbers also concerning diversity and in particular gender. That is what we have been looking at actually more specifically through the different ages, and not only professionals but also staff. Now then there has been COVID. During COVID, the COP requirements have been loosened up a little bit, and this year we have adhered to a new program as pioneers of a revised format of the COP. And we have to provide much more information to prepare our annual communication. And we have to behave like a corporate would do, so publishing a strategic plan. And that becomes more difficult because as we know, and we advise our own clients on social and greenwashing, we shouldn't do that on ourselves. So that is where it becomes tricky to make sure that what you engage, it's not just about telling the market how many beautiful initiatives you have done in the past 2 years, but it's about putting this in context with an objective and a trajectory. And so there is a need to involve management much more than for the sign-off. And we have also now hired a group of one partner and other associates who are devoted to ESG in particular and to the measurement of the impact. And that, of course, is a technique that applies to whatever issue you want to address, including diversity and inclusion. So indeed, for this kind of commitment to be serious one, it has to be measurable. And of course, every firm, depending on its size, markets, projects, may have its own standards and its own objectives. I think it's very important to have a flexible format because we don't only want to speak to the big firms. Every firm has its own way of being, but it's very useful to have this kind of tool, which is universally accepted as an international standard. Also, again, to sell internally how to proceed along the lines of a given process. So it gives some strength to also render the efforts not just measurable, but also objective in the sense that you take it a bit away from the perception that there might be of it being just a marketing tool, because it's then linked to certifications that you achieve. There are auditing firms that will render a certification on certain quality requirements. So again, for large firms, it's very much like companies. We are getting certified for very many things, and we have lots of work going into it from the administration and staff. And this can be linked to diversity and inclusion as well.
Thank you, Cecilia. While I find it a bit difficult to think that all these improvements can be perfectly measured, because of course, I mean, otherwise you need to put a target on reaching a specific threshold or percentage of, for example, women or other categories in the firm. Indeed, on the other hand, we all know that certifications and rankings are something of a great deal in the legal world. So, of course, at some point they will be helpful also in respect to diversity and inclusion. And thank you for sharing the experience of your firm. I think you have also answered to my last question, where I would like to involve you all. And it is to have you provide the audience with the experience of your firm or your experience in practical achievements in respect to diversity at this current stage, and eventually also ways of improvement that you are already considering in your firm. In this respect, I would like Kat you to speak last, because you have a broader view on many law firms. So I think it would be great if you can, let's say, provide a kind of wrap up on what we are hearing today. So Stefan, do you want to go first?
Yes, sure. Yeah, what are some tips? I think you could have three pillars. I see personally three pillars, in fact. The first pillar is awareness, creating a mindset. A mindset to have people opening and broadening and seeing also the issues, avoiding unconscious bias, for instance. So really awareness and implying everyone who needs to be implied. And as we are an international firm, you can do that from an international perspective, but I think it's very important also to do it on a local level, because the culture may be somewhat different. Some issues may be a little bit different, how you see things, for instance, if you do it on a local level, then the local people will be involved, or will certainly have something to say and will contribute. And that is very important, I think. That is that you have as many people alongside with that specific road, I would say, to achieve your goals. So first of all is awareness, events organizing, creating a certain, I would say, mindset that some things are bad or are even not to be said, etc., etc. And then I come to the second one, is accountability. I think whenever there is bad behavior, or there is behavior which is not in line with the target or with the goal, that people are accountable for it, and that they are either they have a conversation with someone to explain why what they said or what they have done is not correct or is not within the values of the firm, for instance. If you wanted to make it more severe, it's about payment, of course, and having a pay cut, or on the other side, even if you think about it more positively, people who are really champions of D&I give a bonus, an extra bonus. So that's the second pillar, is accountability. And then the third pillar is, of course, having a clear strategy. I was mentioning fix the system, not the people. That is to put in place all the tools, the policies, which makes it possible, of course, to, on the one hand, have the image of diversity, that you really want to tackle the issues, that you really want to open up the different policies to different scenarios, except from the very traditional ones. And I have a strategy, and as I said, someone who is also reviewing, is monitoring this, so that there is an external or internal. For instance, we have a specific manager dedicated to D&I who is at all promotion interviews, who is at all salary increase interviews. So for him to see whether all these interviews are equal and that there is no partner tending towards favorizing more men than women, etc., etc. So that is also very important, to have a monitoring system in place. So these are my three, I would say, pillars to tips to get where a law firm should be. And it's of course evolving as society is evolving.
Of course, indeed. Thank you, Stefan. Daniel, what's your experience and tips for it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we're all broadly in agreement. I'm mindful of time as well, so I'll try to be brief. But what Stefan just said, I strongly endorse. You need to issue policies, you need to raise awareness, you need to cultivate the correct culture. But to my mind, that's the starting point, and it's not sufficient. And measurability, measuring progress, that's the crux, and having a means to objectively verify whether real action is being taken to promote DEI and whether you're achieving your objectives or not is is key, and that is how you hold management to account. And law firms are awash with data. And I know that my own firm, we devote a substantial amount of resource to data analysis so we can actually discern whether unconscious bias is creeping into decision-making by the partnership, whether that's in terms of recruitment or in terms of lawyer utilization as well. So there is a resourcing issue. Not all firms are of equal size. You do have to devote significant resource to be able to undertake this sort of forensic audit of what your lawyers are doing to guard against unconscious bias, to assure that there is equal opportunity for all. But certainly, if you have the resource, you need to undertake that kind of activity. I think you have to use some imagination about how you look at the data which is available to you and use it to ensure that DEI ambitions are actually being realized. So look, I agree with all of this, and I think Stefan's covered some of that ground. One other thing I do want to call out personally, because this is something I really passionately believe in, and it's something I've seen many firms fail at. If you're advocating diversity and inclusivity, you actually have to include everybody. And throughout this workshop, we've been talking about lawyers. I think we've all been talking about lawyers as a shorthand for all employees within a law firm. I don't want anyone to sort of leave this workshop with the erroneous impression that D&I initiatives are focused solely at lawyers and are solely to the benefit of lawyers. We mustn't marginalize non-lawyers, so our support staff, our administrative staff, everyone who contributes to the firms in which we work. If you want to have a culture which values and esteems diversity, inclusivity, you have to include everybody in that. And I think you have to carry everyone with you to try to accomplish those goals. So those are sort of two key learnings for me.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Cecilia, I don't know whether you want to add something to what you had said before.
Yes, I can maybe add just a few ideas in terms of tools that can be used, not directly from our own firm, but I have seen this working a lot, is championing programs. So when it comes to arbitration, for instance, I can speak of that because it's my field of work. You have the possibility as counsel to appoint arbitrators of other firms. So also through appointment of colleagues of other firms, you can maintain and express a inclusion policy. And in some jurisdictions, a champion program have been working very well. So most firms active in the market have identified one partner to be part of the program, and he or she are then accountable for making appointments among female practitioners. And this, of course, this concept can be applied to different kinds of programs in different fields of the law and for different forms of diversity and inclusion. But I think it's a very positive way to, again, let the program be a cooperative one. So it requires a champion. I don't know if you say in English championess, we have, I don't know, but it requires two sides. So somebody who takes the engagement for the others, and also others that can take the benefit or be part of the walk, so to say. That does create a spirit of community and is a very inclusive exercise per se. And I think firms should look more openly about creating communities for these purposes that go beyond the individual firm and really affect the community, the legal community more broadly.
Thank you very much. Kathleen, we have the last 5 minutes, and I think we all want to know your tips from your vast experience.
I'll try to be brief. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Daniel as well, because he made a very valuable point about, non-legal and legal. There's a gap, and has been always a serious gap between the focus, of course, on diversity and inclusion. Especially inclusion means that we should include professionals and all that, We were focusing on associates more today because of the association, but I value that that's very important, because that's something law firms tend to forget. Even in their diversity programs, they're looking for diverse talent, and they would still focus on lawyers only, which is not necessarily what we need. From an alliance perspective, so when we started and seeing now that there are 50 members, as Daniel and Stefan said, who are members as well, and I took some notes in the fact that about awareness, accountability, those are all the valuable points that indeed are very important. It starts with respect. In the sense that, I did not feel home or safe, being part of the community, LGBT community. Many young female lawyers do not feel included. People of color may not find a home nor feel safe. How many disabled people are necessarily giving opportunity, because that's a group we often tend to forget, and so much more. So yes, data shows that diversity is good for business, but the truth is a little bit more complicated. Diversity is good for business when the organization knows how to truly embrace value and make use of the diversity in leadership and workforce. So when leadership knows how to draw out diverse perspective, build on them, then I guess we're probably making a lot better progress, but we have to also remain realistic. There is no doubt that serious efforts to reach a culture of inclusion, it's crucial to remain committed and to make progress step by step, but the key is to remain consistent, as was already said. And I recently actually read about it, which I thought was one of the best slogans I've read so far. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Diversity and inclusion is a marathon, not a sprint. So it's definitely important. When we come to tips, I think it starts with recognizing that talent comes in all shapes, sizes, colors, background, cultures, personalities, name it. It's a change management that requires time and efforts, and that's what we already mentioned, resources and support. Everyone has to be committed to that culture, and everyone has to be treated with respect. I think when it comes to all those points, I mean, we just keep on repeating ourselves, but as I said, walk the talk. What we've done now with Lydia, just to close on it, I think that's an important next step, is we can continue organizing events as much as, and raise awareness, which is very important. But what about the actual action plan? And we recently started with a sort of like what we call a Concept Lydia Lab, where we actually choose a specific topic, where we focus with a couple of firms that are really dedicated to do that. For instance, on the socio-economic background, which is one of the topics and one of the things we really encounter, all of us, and looking to, okay, how can we actually work together? And we have several work groups who are looking at from different perspectives, recruitment and so on, and then come up with an action plan and then really do it. Because otherwise we keep on, organizing events, raising awareness, talk about it, but in 5 years' time, it will be still the same thing. So what I would highly recommend, whatever industry you are in, look into what you actually can do. And of course, don't blame yourself that it's not immediately, the progress is not immediately shown. I mean, measuring is an important one, but it takes time. You can measure quantity, but not necessarily quality. So there's so much that comes with it. So that's what I would like to conclude on. I think the major thing is that we are willing to do it and actually take action. So that's for me the two most important, in a simple way said.
Thank you very much, Kat, and thank you to all the speakers, Stefan, Daniel, Cecilia. I think I see that participants are still with us, so I think the discussion has been really interesting and practical and frank. If I can leave the audience with a very short wrap up, I think that today we have understood that improving diversity and inclusion in your law firm is an economic choice, first of all. Our clients that are asking lawyers to do that. So I think it's another good takeaways, and it is indeed an easy task to undertake, because you can start with baby steps and always work in improving. There is a lot to do, but I think that if there is the will, of course, the task to be done can be done quite easily. So thank you very much again. Indeed, thank you to all the participants, and I hope to see you soon in other AIJA events. Thank you again.